Hey guys, MProductions Gaming here, and on this episode of Pirate This, we'll be looking at the anti-piracy measures present in Ghost Trick Phantom Detective, a cult classic game on the Nintendo DS created by Shu Takumi, the same man behind the Ace Attorney series. For starters, while on the title screen, everything may look fine, but if you click on the options button, you'll notice the first oddity. The menu options are a bunch of blank buttons. Normally, the only options this game offers on the title screen are language settings, so if we compare this with a legitimate copy of the game, you'll see which language option is which. You can actually still click on any of these options even though they're blank, and it'll still correctly change the language of the game. The Japanese version, however, is the only version that doesn't offer language settings, so they don't have an options button on the title screen. Moving on from there, after making sure your language settings are all good to go and clicking on New Game, the second thing you'll notice upon starting is that there's also no text on screen. Once again, let's compare this with the legit version to show what's missing here. Now, if the pirated version of Ghost Trick is your first time experiencing this game, and you immediately started the game without looking at the options menu first, you probably wouldn't have noticed anything wrong just yet. At most, you probably would have assumed this cinematic is meant to be told visually without any dialogue. On top of that, you'd also probably wave away the screen darkening itself every once in a while as just an artistic choice by the developers. It wouldn't be completely obvious to most pirates there's something wrong until the first text bubble of the game appears on screen, completely blank. All of what I've shown you up to this point is essentially the game's first line of defense against pirates: removing all text. And quick note, when I say all text, I'm referring specifically to text boxes, in-game speech bubbles, monologues on top of blackened screens, and anywhere else you can find character dialogue. Speaking of anywhere else, I should also mention this game has a log feature. For those who don't play visual novels, this is a very common feature that allows you to reread old text characters have already said. If you're thinking you can use that as a clever workaround to see the missing dialogue, as I kind of spoiled earlier, you'll be disappointed to find all the text removed from there too. There's still text per se, but in the form of images and sprites, like this one for example, or the ones on the top screen of the Nintendo DS. The text shown there are also images used to provide the name of the object the player is currently possessing, along with a verb or short description of what the player can physically do with the object they're possessing. And finally, the parts where the game teaches you what each on-screen button does by showing you an image of them in the text boxes. Funnily enough, these images in the pirated version appear in the correct position in the text boxes as they do in the legit version, almost as if the text was there. So I do have to wonder if the text and speech bubbles and dialogue boxes are still there in a pirated copy, but either its opacity is set to 0, or its font color is just set to white to blend in with the background color. Before I continue, for those not familiar with Ghost Trick's premise, let me briefly explain, and trust me, this will come into play later, so keep what I'm about to say next in mind. The game's plot centers around a guy named Sissel. He recently died, and he's trying to both regain his memories and learn the truth behind his death before dawn. He also has a few abilities known as the powers of the dead, one of which allows him to possess and manipulate inanimate objects, and the other, and the most important one, being the power to jump through time, specifically to 4 minutes before another person's death. Ghost Trick's main draw is the 4 minutes before death puzzle sections, in which you use Sissel's powers of the dead to undo other characters' deaths and change their fates to further help you solve your own mystery. But the game's a visual novel at heart, so outside these sections, you're mainly reading text. There's also no voice acting either, so pirated versions removing dialogue text should already be enough to deter most pirates from continuing to play their illegitimate copy. However, some pirates might continue playing anyways. If they can't enjoy the narrative, the least they can do is enjoy playing the 4 minutes before death gameplay sections. The first instance of this gameplay section is actually with the red-headed woman, named Lynn, who you saw get killed by an assassin in the first few moments of the game. After she's already dead, this cutscene plays. From here, in order to reach the 4 minutes gameplay portion, you're told by a mysterious ghost, who I'll refer to as Lamp Ghost so as to not spoil their identity, that you need to reach Lynn's core first. And, as a quick reminder, since the pirated version removes all dialogue text from appearing, you technically wouldn't know about anything I just described a few seconds ago, if that's the version you're playing. Based on context clues from the game's cutscenes, the only thing you would know is that the redhead woman's dead, and you need to reach her and interact with her in some way. And since the game railroads you with the limited amount of objects you can attach to and possess, it'd be pretty difficult for pirates to not know what to do at this point. So far, so good. Once you reach her core, you'll see Lynn is completely silent. She doesn't respond to anything Sissel says to her, even to the point where he shouts at her. The lamp ghost butts in to explain that Lynn's spirit is essentially unconscious at the moment because she's recently deceased, so it'll take some time for her spirit to wake up in a sense. In the meantime, the lamp ghost takes the opportunity to reveal to both Sissel and the player that when interacting with people who've been dead for less than 24 hours, Sissel has the ability to go back in time to 4 minutes before that person's death. After the lamp ghost drops that bombshell on you, you'll see Lynn is completely silent. She doesn't respond to anything Sissel says to her, even to the point where he shouts at her. The lamp ghost butts in to explain that Lynn's spirit is essentially unconscious at the moment because she's recently deceased, so it'll take some time for her spirit to wake up in a sense. By the way, that wasn't an editing glitch with my voice lines. I repeated myself on purpose because the game itself just repeated its dialogue, and I had nothing new to say to describe it, so I might as well use the same voice clip again. All jokes aside, in the pirated version, the conversation resets back to the beginning, specifically to the point right after you reach Lynn's core for the first time. To better demonstrate where the repeat is happening, I'll show a comparison with the legit version so you have dialogue text to look at, making it a better frame of reference. For the sake of time, so the video won't be longer than it needs to be, I'll be speeding through it, but hopefully the comparison should make what I was explaining more clear to you in case you didn't understand the visual I showed earlier. Even if we didn't have footage from a legal copy of the game to compare, a guaranteed way to know it's repeated dialogue is by holding down the B button on your Nintendo DS or 3DS to see if the game lets you skip text. Like most visual novels, Ghost Trick has a feature that allows you to fast forward through text you've already seen before. So by holding down the B button, you can clearly see the game skipping through text boxes and displaying the fast forward symbol. Weirdly enough, this serves as the game's second line of defense against pirates. And I say it's weird because the dialogue only repeats once, so this isn't a situation where you'd be soft-locked in a never-ending conversation. After it repeats the first time, the game will progress, so I can't really guess how this is supposed to deter pirates, other than wasting their time. But at this point in the game, you'd already be so used to mashing the A button to get through empty text boxes that you probably wouldn't have even noticed a random conversation repeating itself if it wasn't pointed out to you. To be honest, the only reason I noticed is because I personally played this game before, so while recording footage for this video, it felt strange to me at first that Sissel's and the Lamp Ghost's chat was going on longer than I remember. In addition, this is the only time in the whole game where a conversation repeats itself. It doesn't happen anywhere else, making it more of a mystery as to why the devs only made this part replay itself and no other parts. So since it only repeats once, what happens when you reach the last text box a second time? The button to rewind time and start the 4 minutes before death section slides onto screen. Let's press it to get sent back in time and begin the 4 minutes before death gameplay segment. Does this cutscene look familiar to you? If not, I played it earlier in this video while I was giving a short synopsis to the intro of the game. As a reminder, this cutscene plays after Lynn gets killed by the assassin for the first time. The reason I'm pointing this out is because this is the game's final defense against pirates, replaying the previous cutscene. Once again, let's go to the legit version of the game to see what's supposed to happen when clicking the rewind time button. Unlike those dialogue boxes from earlier that repeated itself once, this is an endless loop. This essentially brings an end to your playthrough on a pirated copy, as you're permanently unable to progress from this point. You can skip through all the text boxes from this point on by using the B button because the game remembers you've seen them before, but when you arrive at the rewind time button again, clicking it will just bring you back to this cutscene once again. And, just in case you're wondering, the conversation Sissel and the lamp ghost had earlier that repeated itself once, will do so again once you reach that part again. In a sense, the game technically didn't lie to you. When it said rewind time, it did rewind time. It just didn't rewind enough. And in a case of somewhat morbid but comedic irony, despite Ghost Trick's main gameplay loop revolving around going back in time to undo people's deaths, the devs made it so pirates will keep getting themselves sent back to the moment after Lynn's death instead of before, basically dooming you to failure over and over. Now for those curious, I couldn't find any info detailing specifically how the devs programmed the game to check if it's a pirated copy. Whatever the piracy check is, most modern Nintendo DS emulators are able to bypass it with ease. There's a few exceptions of course, and I'll get into one of them in a bit. But resources like the cutting room floor have also stated using flashcards will trigger it too. I don't own any, and even if I did, I don't believe capture cards for the DS even exist, so I wouldn't have a clean way to record off of one if I wanted to showcase it for you guys. However, on ROM sites that distribute Ghost Trick, there's old comments complaining about them experiencing anti-piracy effects on their DS. So personally, I'm willing to trust what CCRF stated about flashcards triggering the game's piracy protection. From experimenting with different emulators and their builds, I only got results from a multi-console emulator on the Nintendo 3DS called Twilight Menu++. The caveat is it triggers the game's piracy protection one time only. After you've already set up the emulator and loaded the game for the first time, once you close the emulator and open it again, the game will automatically be patched properly. So if you're curious and you want to see Ghost Trick's anti-piracy for yourself, and you own a modded 3DS, the best method I found to repeatedly trigger it is by going into your SD card, deleting the files and folders you originally put there when you first installed Twilight Menu, and replacing them with the files and folders you originally downloaded from their website or GitHub page. If the language setup options appear upon opening up the app, you're good to go. This is also where I recorded all my pirated footage for this video. At the time of recording, I was using version 24.6.0. Earlier versions produced the same results as well. I'm pretty confident I covered everything the pirated version of Ghost Trick has to offer, but if any super fans of the game that know it better from top to bottom notice any other differences or oddities I didn't cover in this video, point them out in the comments section, or on my Twitter page. For example, back when I made a pirate this episode on Metal Gear Solid 1 and I asked if anyone could show me an image of the PAL version of the MGS HD Collection's instruction manual to help me confirm what I talked about in the video, a viewer by the Twitter handle Leo2Bianchi answered that question. So I'm definitely open to hearing from you guys if you have anything to share related to this video too. But with that concludes this episode of Pirate This. I'm honestly curious if Capcom will keep some form of this anti-piracy measure in the upcoming remaster they're releasing on Nintendo Switch. But since it's being made for different hardware, and more developers nowadays commission third-party companies to provide piracy protection instead of programming it themselves like they did in the past, I wouldn't be surprised if it's not there. But that's just my opinion. If you have a different one, feel free to share it in the comments down below. And if you have any games with interesting piracy measures in mind you'd like me to look into for future episodes, let me know in the comments as well, and I'll keep them noted for later. Thank you guys for watching, stay safe, and I hope to see you all on the next episode.